welcome to Dharma Podcast. Thank you all for joining us again. We shall continue chronicling the history of the Congress Party of Sandeep Balakrishna. In the last episode, Sandeep clearly established that Gandhi, unilaterally exceeding his brief, out-caliphed the caliph himself. He also placed a stunning fact in public domain, where Jinnah himself wasn't very approving of some of his plans on the Khilafat movement. On that note, we shall resume this conversation and continue chronicling the history of Congress Party. Hello, Sandeep.
Hi, Parag.
So, very keen to hear, I'm sure, the audience that what happened next after Gandhi out-caliphed the caliph himself and broke all possible norms of his own limitations. Can we take it forward from there?
Yeah, sure, Parag. Thanks. Good to be back with another episode of the long history of the comprehensive history of the Congress Party. So, in today's episode, we will unpack the exact nature and the consequences of the so-called non-cooperation movement, which was really the Khilafat movement, the Pan Islamic cause called Khilafat. We will unpack several eye-opening details of all this. And, to put the same thing in a different way, Gandhi's fashioning of something called a non-cooperation movement was actually his subterfuge to mislead Hindus into supporting this pan-Islamic cause called Khilafat movement. And like I said, from the beginning, the Muslim community had absolutely no doubt that they were fighting for their community's cause, meaning the Pan-Islamic Khilafat cause. And nobody out there in that community was under any illusion that it was a struggle to liberate India from the clutches of colonial British rule. Nobody had any such doubt that it was anything but a freedom struggle. On the other hand, Hindus who were fooled by Mohandas Gandhi actually believed with their heart and soul, believed that they were fighting for the freedom of India. Remember, in I think the third or the fourth episode predating today's episode, I had narrated the promise that Gandhi had made in regard to this so-called non-cooperation movement. He said that this non-cooperation movement, the ultimate goal of the non-cooperation movement was to throw out the British in 1 year and to attain Swaraj for India in 1 year. And look how it is panning out. Okay, you see the sequence of events. So I urge all of you in the audience to, kind of go back to those previous episodes to have the full historical context and the sequence of events. And by this kind of subterfuge, by lying, by misleading, this is how Gandhi achieved the alleged Hindu-Muslim unity. Through shameless deceit, which was inflicted by the toxic combination called Mohandas Gandhi and the Ali brothers. And because no lie, no untruth can sustain for a long time, the whole farce, the whole cabal, which went in under the name of non-cooperation movement and freedom struggle, this whole cabal came undone. So it was a short-lived Hindu-Muslim unity, which really achieved nothing but which cost the Hindu community a lot. We look at those aspects as we go on. There is a saying in Telugu, Parag. I'll translate it for you. It basically says that the money that was earned through theft was lost in the brothel.
But how telling, how scathing.
Yeah, so this is the, exact nature of the consequence of the farce called Khilafat movement and the non-cooperation nonsense. And the non-cooperation movement clearly proved again and again that religion had a stronger hold, Qawm and religion had a stronger hold on the minds of the Muslim community. But on this side, many Congress leaders and even masses of ordinary Hindus were fooled by Gandhi, and they belatedly realized that they were fooled, and the fact that the edifice of the Hindu-Muslim unity was founded on an artificial basis, and it was not designed on any clear-cut or visionary national plan or patriotism and other nice things. So when they realized this truth, it was too late. Which now brings us to the point which most viewers of the Dharma podcast were asking me. This is the full details of how the Khilafat movement actually panned out on the ground. Let's look at this step by step. Now, even as a Congress and the Khilafat Committee were having all these sessions and special sessions in various cities, Banaras, Calcutta, Nagpur, all those places, and even as they were busy charting out the plans of action, the leaders of the Muslim community were in a parallel movement. They were engaged in something else. And this something else was an elaborate, deliberate and carefully thought out preparation for ground action to be done exclusively by the Muslim community. Okay, two things were happening in parallel. And throughout undivided India, I'll just give some outlines of how this planning and what exactly went on in these meetings. So throughout undivided India, various influential leaders of the Muslim community, including their Ulema, they began making incendiary speeches which clearly showed that they had zero respect for the Gandhian brand of non-violence. Let's not go too far, Parag. For starters, let's not go too far. A straightforward point. I'll tell you a straightforward point. Take Muhammad Ali, infamous Ali brothers. Take Muhammad Ali, who Gandhi variously, repeatedly called him as my dear brother, and he carries me in his pocket. That kind of nauseating verbiage. Anyway, so this Muhammad Ali, even while he was seducing Gandhi and making common cause with the Congress, even while he was doing that, he openly claimed and repeatedly claimed that I am a Muslim first and everything else later.
And this is conveniently lost on Gandhi.
It was not lost.
But he went ahead in spite of that.
Gandhi conveniently ignored it. As simple as that. Still, despite this kind of religious identity first and everything else later, despite this, Gandhi was somehow convinced that the Ali brothers were the true nationalists, that they were on the equal footing with the nationalist freedom struggle movement. And on this point, R.C. Majumdar, gives a beautiful verdict on this, and I quote him. Gandhi's faith in the nationalism of the Ali brothers and their non-violent spirit can only be described as pathetic in character. Perfect. He nails it perfectly. Now, the next big turning point came in the month of July 1921. In a highly public meeting in Karachi was part of India. In a highly public meeting in Karachi, Muhammad Ali made a thundering speech to Muslims which would eventually have far-reaching consequences. And the immediate outcome of that meeting was that he got a fatwa issued by a record number of 500 Ulemas throughout India. And I'll read out the wording of the fatwa. Quote, it is in every way religiously unlawful for a Mussalman at the present moment to continue in the British Army or to induce others to join the army. And it is a duty of all the Mussalmans in general and the Ulemas in particular to see that these religious commandments are brought home to every Mussalman in the army. Close quote. In other words, you forget the colonial nature of the British rule, but they had put a system in place, a government in place, that's a separate point. So in plain words, this is called incitement to Bagawat or rebellion. Simple. Right? This is what this fatwa read. And the moment, and it was widely circulated, and the moment the fatwa became public, the British government swung into action and wasted no time in arresting Maulana Muhammad Ali, Maulana Shaukat Ali, and 4 other prominent Muslim leaders. They put them in jail, and they put them on the stands on trial and convicted them on charge of passing this dangerous fatwa. It was sedition basically. Right? And the sentence was 2 years of rigorous imprisonment. Parag, like I always say, the British knew how to run an empire.
Evidently. And this is the kind of quick, ruthless action that needs to be taken.
Precisely. And they were also smart enough to understand the practical outcome of such a fatwa. And today we have clones of this Muhammad Ali type of character, Mr. OIC and rest of those other, that Numani guy, hundreds of those characters, giving much more incendiary speeches in an allegedly independent India, and they are not taken to task.
Because no cost is being imposed on them.
Just this one fatwa, 2 years rigorous imprisonment. But I'll tell you the outcome of what happened. This rigorous imprisonment, this conviction, was exactly what the Ali brothers had wanted all along. This is psychological games, These guys, they were not ordinary people, boss. They were manipulators and bigoted manipulators and, political strategists of the highest order. You have to credit them with that. So, this sentence, like I said, was exactly what the Ali brothers wanted. And as soon as the verdict was passed, a huge Muslim mob outside the court cheered them. They applauded the Ali brothers, who had become heroes overnight
among the
within the
community.
Okay, but this fatwa elsewhere had also taken off in an unprecedented way. After barely days after the Ali brothers were sentenced, huge meetings, large crowds of meetings were held across India, throughout North India, North and Madhya Bharat, basically in Delhi, Agra, Lucknow, Kanpur, Bulandshahr, Lahore and Nagpur, even Jabalpur. And as usual, this kind of meeting are attended by tens of thousands of Muslims. Clergy who addressed all these bigoted meetings, they further incited the crowds to the point of making them repeat the fatwa word by word.
Oh, that is what they did?
Mass. Word by word, 10,000 people.
Uttering the same thing.
The wording. This is when they say calm, you have to get into these details to know the implications. Now, my friend Parag, guess who else repeated and endorsed this fatwa?
Gandhi.
Absolutely right. The great Mahatma Gandhi. He repeated the wording, not only repeated, but he officially endorsed this fatwa using the platform of the Indian National Congress. He read out a public manifesto which declared this fatwa, and I quote directly from that manifesto, which Gandhi read out. It is contrary to the national dignity for any Indian to serve as a civilian and more specially as a soldier under a system of government which has brought about India's economic, moral and political degradation. Close quote. Same fatwa, no? Same fatwa. Look at the sheer hypocrisy of Mr. Gandhi, Parag. This great Mahatma, by endorsing this fatwa, what he's done is that he equates the arrest of the Ali brothers with national dignity. Hindu-Muslim unity, yeah? You have to, it's like a cloth which you have to carefully, take it apart thread by thread, which is what we are doing now. And we are supposed to believe that, by endorsing such bigoted, fanatical fatwas, we are supposed to believe that this was the basis for Gandhi forging Hindu-Muslim unity. Yes or no?
Yes.
Clearly.
And clearly one-sided,
right?
At a complete cost to only one community.
Now, here's the thing. Both the Muslims and the Hindus, both communities hated the British equally. But the source of their hatred was different. In the case of Muslims, their hatred for the British was because they saw them as the destroyers and the usurpers of the long spell of the political power that the Muslim community had enjoyed
till then.
Right? This was the source of their hatred. This is vastly different from Hindus who saw the British as the illegal occupants of their sacred soil, Bharatavarsha, Punya Bhumi Bharatavarsha, and the destroyers of their culture. The sources, as different, as contrasting as chalk and cheese.
The difference between evolution and Stone Age.
Totally. That reminds me of a beautiful cartoon, that very hard-hitting cartoon that somebody had sent me recently. It has two boxes. Left side of the box is a pile of human skulls. Standing on top of this pile of human skulls is a medieval sultan. On the other side, you have a pile of books related to philosophy, economics, statecraft, dharma, what is known as rituals, all these things. On top of that pile, a rishi or a sadhu is standing.
Very beautiful, evocative.
Very evocative.
Conveys the point.
Very evocative. So this cartoon, it illustrates the difference here. The analogy is perfectly applicable as to the vast difference in the source of the hatred against the British that Hindus had and Muslims had. Alright? So, now, before the British arrived in India, the biggest political formation, the greatest pan-Indian power, was the Grand Maratha Empire. By then, Muslim power had been thoroughly crushed. The Mughal Empire was, had crumbled almost into dust, and whatever was left of Muslim power were a smattering of Nawabs and Nizams and local Muslim chieftains. And if the Marathas and other Hindu rulers had had some foresight and some sense of unity, they would have crushed the British in the middle of the 18th century. Or at least by the start of the 19th century, and the rule of the surviving Nawabs and Nizams would have been extinct. History would have been altered in an unprecedented fashion. So we need to keep all these historical realities in mind when we do this kind of analysis. It is not just Khilafat movement, it is not just Indian freedom struggle, but all the things that, all the forces that led up to these things. Alright, now let's rewind to the month of April 1921. By April, it was 2 or 3 months after the Congress and the Khilafat Committee had formally adopted the Khilafat and the non-cooperation resolution sometime in Jan or Feb of 1921. But by then, even by April 1921, no concrete plan of agitation or ground action, boycott, all these things, no concrete plan had been formalized or decided. They were all in discussion. But one thing was clear, that the Gandhi-led Congress would lead the Khilafat movement from the front, meaning the Khilafat movement would be frontally helmed by Mohandas Gandhi, and both the Ali brothers and the rest of the Hindu leadership in the Congress party would follow his lead. Clear?
Yeah.
Right. And like I said in the previous episode, the Muslim leadership had its own separate plan. I just mentioned it a few minutes back in this episode. So, what is this plan? How it translated into ground action, where all it translated into ground action, and what were the consequences of that action. To understand that, let's visit a place called Malegaon in Maharashtra and let us have a first-hand view. First-hand, almost like an eyewitness view in hindsight, to see what this plan was, how people implemented it, and what were the brutal consequences for the Hindu community. All right. So the city is Malegaon, a small town back then, and the date is 15th March 1920. 15th March 1920. Much before the Khilafat was even formalized as a body with a concrete plan of action and things like that. So on 15th March 1920, a Khilafat Committee and a body of volunteers was established in Malegaon. This Khilafat Committee's activities, they initially began in the form of a series of lectures and something called wazas. Waza in Urdu.
Okay.
So these lectures were basically meant to arouse and awaken the Muslim community to political news.
Okay.
In other words, to develop a sort of political awareness within the Muslim community. So this was the aim of the lecture series. Now the wazas were an entirely different thing. Wazas were also basically, you can call them as Islamic religious sermons. That usually happens during the Friday namaz, but this was a special kind of waza, which had an explicit goal of raising the pitch of the Muslim community's temper in support, in preparation for practical action, which would eventually be accomplished when the Khilafat movement began. So this is the purpose of the waza. Now, fast forward to January 1921. Shaukat Ali visited Malegaon in that month and he gave a series of lectures, bigoted lectures, incendiary lectures on the Khilafat movement. And a few days after he left Malegaon, the whole town was literally boiling. The tone and the frequency of the wazas henceforth intensified. The district magistrate, when he saw what was happening, Malegaon was a very, very small town back then, 1 century back, very small town. And the district magistrate, when he saw what was happening out there, he was truly alarmed, and plus he received all kinds of scary reports from the intelligence department, and that really kind of frightened him where this is going. And then he became even more alarmed, even more frightened when he saw with his own eyes that Muslims were openly carrying swords, knives, daggers and bludgeons to these wazas, which were public meetings. Okay. So this district magistrate, his name is Mr. Thakkar. So he issued a proclamation, an official order on 30th March 1921, summarily banning these lectures and wazas. And this ban was the exact excuse that the Muslim community was desperately looking for.
To come to the streets.
Provocation. Okay. They openly defied the ban and scoffed at the DM. And so the DM slapped several cases and hearings were, going on against some leaders, local leaders in Malegaon. And even as all these hearings were going on, on April 24th, 1921, a Muslim leader addressed his community members, and I quote a small sentence from that. What he basically said was this: "Do not be afraid of the Sarkar or the police. Allah will give you strength to promote Islam."
Exactly, in so many words.
Close quote. And this prominent Muslim leader and 6 others were sentenced to prison by the district magistrate, Mr. Thakkar, like I said. And they were also, imposed, he also imposed fines, hefty fines on them. And the Muslim mob, which had assembled outside the court to, witness this trial, it seized this opportunity and immediately launched street riots. It was a spree of bloodlust and bloodletting, arson and violence. And I will quote a summary of what happened next, the moment this verdict was announced, what happened over the course of next 3 days. From that moment onwards, I will quote a few extracts from various primary sources, including British reports of that period. Report number 1. This is found in the appendix of Mr. Shankaran Nayar's book on Gandhi. Quote, "On the result being known," meaning the verdict, "on the result being known, the mob that had collected gave vent to their feelings by the loud cries of Allahu Akbar, the war cry used by the mob throughout the riot. It assaulted all the police to be found in the town of Malegaon, burned a temple, killed a sub-inspector of police and threw his body into the fire, and looted the houses of all who were opposed to the Khilafat movement, and the owners themselves having fled the town in the meantime." This is report number 1. Close quote. Now, report number 2 is slightly more detailed and it's very graphic. This is found in Dr. R.C. Majumdar's book. Quote, "A serious mob outbreak at Malegaon in the Nasik district. The population was predominantly Muslim. The conviction of several Momins," meaning Muslims, "the conviction of several Momins in April 1921 for carrying arms at a mass meeting in contravention of an order by the district magistrate created great commotion, and a police constable was roughly handled. Thereupon, the city sub-inspector with a few official and a dozen armed constables proceeded to the town. Being attacked by the mob, his men fired some rounds of small shots in the air, but as the mob did not disperse, they took refuge in a Hindu temple," meaning the cops. "The mob brought fuel and kerosene and set fire to the temple, which was burnt down along with several neighboring houses. The sub-inspector, while trying to escape in the guise of a woman, was caught, beaten to death and thrown in the fire. 1 or 2 constables were also killed and burnt alive, while the other officials escaped, though grievously injured. The mob cut the telegraph wires and stopped all the mail tongas from running," meaning no post or communication service, "disrupted, violently shattered. The unarmed police in town were duly driven out of the town. Some were beaten to death and some were killed. It was alleged that the mob burned the Hindu temple because the sub-inspector had taken refuge there and the inmates of the Hindu temple refused to surrender him to the mob. Next day, the mob plundered scores of Hindu houses because they had refused to join the Khilafat agitation. This was their crime. They then forced the jail authorities to release the convicted Muslims, and for the next 3 days, they burnt various houses and committed all other outrages. Peace was not restored till the arrival of the troops from Ahmednagar on April 29th, 1921. Close quote. 3 days of unhinged, untrammeled bloodletting, vandalism, looting, rapes, mass evictions. Does this remind you of Kashmir?
Kashmir, more is, as we
More-
speak, Sambhal, what
Sambhal,
happened?
Sambhal.
The SP MP went and they cited
Bharuch.
Nu before the
Bharuch.
Bharuch.
We did an episode on that.
Yes, Jharkhand, Ranchi,
Yeah,
same template.
same pattern. Okay, keeps repeating. This happened in Malegaon exactly 103 years and 7 months ago.
So Malegaon's history is now
Yes.
important to know.
And this happened, remember, this is the most important point. This Malegaon Muslim incited riots happened months and months before the Khilafat agitation had been formally launched by Mohandas Gandhi and his peace-loving Ali brothers. This happened months before that.
Months before that.
Okay, that's important. In Malegaon, and who were the innocent victims? Hindus,
Hindus,
as always.
as always.
You see where all the links are, Parag. Where all these
No,
threads
and
are,
how
how these threads are woven.
And the other part, under the garb of intellectual lectures, Vaza, right? If I'm getting it right.
No, Vaza is a religious sermon.
Ah.
These lectures were, to raise the political awareness of the
Yeah,
Muslim
but
community.
under the garb of that, it essentially creating fertile ground for violence to be unleashed.
Exactly.
How well planned.
I'll give you one more link to the present day and Malegaon. Like I said, Malegaon happened more than a century ago. And during the dark UPA regime, Hindus in Malegaon were branded as terrorists.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Colonel Purohit time frame? Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Pragya Thakur.
Pragya Thakur.
Hindus in Malegaon were branded as terrorists, and they were branded as terrorists by who? The same Congress party which repeatedly claims to have gotten freedom for India entirely through Gandhi's non-violence.
Chidambaram was at the forefront, right?
Yeah, all these people.
Saffron terror.
Chidambaram,
Saffron terror
was coined, I think, by Digvijay Singh. All these guys, I mean, they cut from the same cloth.
So,
But Malegaon was just the beginning. What happened next, where all it happened, what all were the consequences, is something that we will discuss in detail in the future episodes, Parag. And I want to make this as detailed as I possibly can. Whether I get views or not, it is national service, it is service to Dharma. It is in that spirit that I'm doing all this. It is the same spirit with which this Dharma Dispatch channel was founded and will remain so.
with that, you heard Sandeep. I would like to repeat what he said. I think the purpose of Dharma Dispatch, I think, and the passion that he brings to the whole cause was very evident in the way he wrapped up this conversation. It is not about views. It is about doing a service to the nation, service to Dharma. And I think he put out stunning, worrying facts. I'm sure many of you are going to have a sleepless night, like I am. And Gandhi continues to be the mascot of all the ill that we are experiencing today in these times too. The template of Hindus taking a back seat, Hindus being at the receiving end at the cost of Hindu-Muslim unity. And Malegaon was the place where he ended the conversation with. And we've all seen in modern times how Colonel Purohit was branded and incarcerated for years. So we shall continue, and each consequence, each episode after this, which again was a dagger in the heart of Bharat, we shall hear from Sandeep himself in the next conversation. Thank you all for joining Dharma Podcast. Please continue to watch and support us. And we would like it if you can like, share and subscribe to the podcast so that more and more people get to view this. Thank you so much.